The mansion was glowing with lights that night. Each corner was filled with laughter. Golden chandeliers, expensive decorations, and the rich smell of food. Important people had come from all over the city: business tycoons, film stars, politicians, and celebrities. Everyone was dressed in the finest clothes. Expensive perfume filled the air, and music played softly in the background from a hired piano player who sat near the grand staircase. It was a party thrown by Mr. Langford, a billionaire. Known for his luxury and pride, he loved attention, and more than that, he loved to show others that money ruled everything. Among the shining guests, no one paid attention to the waitstaff. Young servers moved quickly with trays of drinks and food. Dressed in black and white, heads low, one of them was a young woman named Ella. She looked ordinary to the guests, but her eyes held a quiet fire. She walked carefully between the rich and powerful, making sure not to bump into anyone. She needed this job badly. And even though she didn't like serving people who looked down on her, she stayed silent. Ella had been working at the hotel for almost 2 years. Ever since her mother passed away, she had been alone. She used to study music when she was younger. Her dream was to become a pianist. Her mother saved money just so she could learn. But when illness took her mother and the bills piled up, Ella had to give up everything. Now, her fingers only touched plates and glasses, not piano keys. At the party, the music suddenly stopped. The pianist was taking a break. Some guests looked around, bored. That's when Mr. Langford noticed Ella passing by. She was holding a tray with drinks. He narrowed his eyes and smiled, not kindly, but like a man who had a trick in mind. He had overheard one of the other staff members say something about Ella knowing how to play piano. It gave him an idea. He stood up, raising his voice so the whole room could hear him. "Well, since the music has taken a break, perhaps we can have some entertainment from the staff," he said loudly. The guests chuckled, curious. He pointed toward Ella, who stopped mid-step. "You, girl, I heard you can play piano," he said. "Why don't you show us what you've got?" Ella's face turned white, her mouth opened slightly. "Sir, I haven't played in a long time," she tried to explain. Her voice was soft and shaky, but Mr. Langford just laughed and waved his hand like it didn't matter. "A real artist never forgets, right? Come on now, give us a show." Some guests laughed again, some whispered things like, "This should be fun," or "She's probably terrible." Ella looked around, hoping someone would say it was unfair, but no one did. One of the guards came closer and gently nudged her forward. "Better just do it," he whispered under his breath. He doesn't like being told no. Ella felt trapped. Her heart was racing. She didn't want to be the center of attention, especially like this. She wasn't a toy to be played with. But right now, she had no choice. The job meant money, and she needed it to survive. The grand piano stood at the front of the room like a throne, shiny and black, polished so much that she could see her own nervous reflection in it. She walked slowly toward it, feeling hundreds of eyes watching her every step. Her hands felt cold, her feet like stones. The whispers behind her grew louder. Some were laughing, others were just waiting to enjoy the show. She sat on the bench in front of the piano and stared at the keys. Her fingers hovered above them but didn't move. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her ears. 1,000 memories filled her mind: her mother's voice, the old music sheets, the sound of the piano at home. Mr. Langford leaned back in his chair, sipping his drink, proud of his little surprise. He thought it would be funny. He thought she would embarrass herself. He thought the guests would enjoy it. But what he didn't know was this: behind that waitress uniform was a girl with a soul full of music. She had pain, yes, but also fire, and sometimes, even broken dreams can still make beautiful music. Everyone expected to laugh, but the room had no idea that they were moments away from silence. Not the kind of silence that comes from boredom, but the kind that comes when something unexpected touches the heart. Ella didn't know what would happen next. All she knew was that she was sitting in front of the piano again after so many years, with a crowd ready to laugh at her. And yet, somewhere deep inside, her fingers remembered. They just needed one reason to move, one note, one breath, one moment to begin. Again, and that moment was almost here. Ella sat frozen at the piano. Her heart felt like it would explode. She could hear laughter behind her, whispers too. Some people were already whispering. Bets would she even play a note? Would she run away? Her fingers rested just above the keys, not touching them yet. Her body was stiff, and her eyes stared blankly at the black and white keys in front of her. Mr. Langford chuckled from his seat and raised his glass again. "Come on, girl, don't keep us waiting," he said. His voice was loud, joking, but everyone could feel the power behind it. No one in that room dared to challenge him. Ella had no choice. She turned her head slightly and saw the guard still standing nearby, just in case she tried to leave. Her hands began to tremble. Her mind screamed at her to get up, to walk away, to say no, but her feet would not move. The fear of losing her job, of being blacklisted from other hotels or events, held her in place. One woman in the crowd laughed and said, "Maybe she forgot how to play." A few others joined in. But there were also some who looked concerned. A young man near the back whispered, "This doesn't feel right," but no one spoke up. Ella closed her eyes, trying to block out the room. She could feel all eyes burning into her back. She could feel their judgment without hearing a single word. She remembered when she first learned to play the piano. Her mother would sit beside her, guiding her small hands. Their old house was tiny. The piano was second-hand, a little out of tune, but to them, it was beautiful. Those were quiet days. Safe days, but now she was in a golden hall full of powerful strangers. And this moment didn't feel beautiful at all. Mr. Langford laughed again. "What's the matter?" "Don't tell me the great little piano girl is scared," he said mockingly. He thought he was being funny, but his words cut deep. Ella took a breath and let her fingers touch the keys. Just lightly, but she didn't press down. She was still shaking. Her palms were sweaty. She didn't even know what song to play. Her mind was blank. Someone near the piano whispered, "She's gonna cry." Others leaned forward, waiting for the performance to begin or fail. The lights above her felt hotter now. Her skin burned from the pressure. Her body wanted to disappear. She looked up for a second and caught sight of her reflection in the piano lid. She barely recognized herself just then. Mr. Langford said loudly, "You said your mother taught you, right?" Then play something in her memory, lest she failed to. That moment hit Ella like a punch to the chest. Her breath caught, her eyes burned. She turned her head just a little, and her jaw tightened. That was too far. He didn't know her mother. He didn't know how hard she worked. He didn't know what it meant to lose her. The crowd fell quiet for a second. Maybe even they felt the sting of those words. But the billionaire just smiled and sipped his drink again. Proud of himself, Ella looked back down at the keys. This time, her fingers didn't shake. She placed them gently over the first few notes. She could remember an old song, one her mother used to hum while cooking. But she still hadn't pressed a key. She was almost there, but something held her back. Suddenly, someone in the back shouted, "Let her play in peace." It was the young man who had looked uncomfortable earlier. People turned to him, surprised, but he didn't back down. "You brought her here to embarrass her, but maybe she has more heart than anyone in this room," he added. Mr. Langford raised an eyebrow, but didn't respond. The room went quiet again, not out of respect, but out of curiosity. They wanted to see what the waitress would do now. Ella opened her eyes and stared at the piano one more time. Her breath slowed, her heartbeat still thundered, but there was something else, now a spark. She didn't care anymore if they laughed. She didn't care if she was fired. She didn't even care if she made mistakes. All she wanted in that moment was to play. Not for the crowd, not for Mr. Langford, but for her mother and for herself. Her hands stopped shaking, her back straightened, the whispers faded. And the world went quiet inside her mind. And then, without warning, her fingers moved. She pressed down gently on the first key, a soft, single note that rang through the still room, and in that one note, something had changed. The laughter stopped, the phones were lowered, the mocking smiles faded. No one knew what was coming. But Ella did. She knew the pain, the love, the memories, waiting in her fingers, and finally, she was ready to let the music speak. The soft sound of that first piano note seemed to break through something deep inside Ella. For a moment, she just sat there, her hands still on the key. The room behind her had gone quiet, completely still, even the ones who had been laughing. Now said nothing. Her fingers slowly moved to the next note, then another and another. The melody began gentle, slow, like a whisper in the air. It wasn't a song that anyone in the room recognized, but to Ella, it was one of the most important songs in her life. It was the tune her mother used to hum when folding laundry, when cooking dinner, when trying to comfort Ella on hard nights. It was a lullaby without words, a song full of love, and it had been locked inside her heart for years. She didn't plan to play it. It came on its own. Like her hands remembered more than her mind did. Her eyes were open. But she didn't see the keys. She saw memories. Her mother sitting beside her, smiling gently. Her small fingers trying to stretch across the keys when she was just a child. Her mother's soft voice saying, "Don't worry about mistakes. Just feel it." Ella had forgotten what it felt like to be herself. She had spent years hiding her talent, hiding her pain, hiding her dreams under a tray of glasses and plates. But now, the music was pulling it all out of her. The people in the room didn't speak. They were no longer watching a waitress. They were watching something raw. Something real. Something that didn't fit in their world of money and fake smiles. Some of them sat with their mouths open, surprised that someone like her could play with so much emotion. Others just stared, unsure how to feel. A few already looked ashamed for laughing before. Even Mr. Langford, who had expected a disaster, was leaning forward in his chair now, his drink untouched, his face no longer smiling, but blank, as if confused. Ella didn't notice any of this. Her body moved on its own now. Her right hand danced on the higher keys. Her left gave the song depth. She added gentle swells of volume, letting the music rise and fall like waves in the ocean. It was not perfect. She missed a note or two. Her fingers slipped once, but no one cared. Because it wasn't about perfection. It was about truth. Every note told a piece of her story. A story of dreams broken, of nights crying alone, of a mother gone too soon, and yet also a story of quiet strength, of holding on, of surviving. For the first time in years, Ella wasn't afraid. She wasn't thinking about losing her job or being judged or looking foolish. She was only thinking about the music and the memories it carried. In the middle of the song, her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't stop. A single tear fell down her cheek, and she wiped it quickly with her sleeve. One woman near the front put her hand over her mouth, her eyes glossy. Another man who had earlier laughed was now staring at the piano like it was something holy. And still Ella played. In that moment, the giant hall didn't feel so big. The rich clothes and diamonds didn't matter. The loud voices were gone. It was just her and the piano. Just her and the song. She remembered how her mother used to close her eyes when listening to her play. And now, even in this giant room full of strangers, Ella imagined her mother sitting nearby again. She imagined her mother smiling and saying, "I told you, sweetheart, music lives inside you." The crowd, so used to loud parties, money games, and false praise, didn't know what to do with something so honest. They sat frozen, not even clapping, not even moving. Mr. Langford shifted in his chair, uncomfortable. This wasn't what he planned. He'd hoped to laugh, to make her cry, but instead, he was the one feeling small. Ella reached the last part of the song, a soft section where the melody slowed and touched the heart even more. Her fingers pressed gently, like a whisper, like a goodbye. She wasn't rushing. She let the final notes hang in the air, long and clear, and as she reached the final chord, her hands held it for a moment and then silence. No one spoke. No one clapped. Not yet. They were too stunned, too moved. Ella looked down at her hands. They were no longer shaking. She had done it. She had not only played. She had remembered who she was, the waitress who was forced to play. Had just poured her soul into a single song, and without meaning to, she had made the entire room listen. Truly listen for the first time that night. The room was silent, completely still. Ella sat with her fingers resting on the keys, her head slightly down. Her heart was still beating fast, but not from fear anymore. It was the feeling that comes after something powerful. Her eyes were wet, but she didn't wipe the tears this time. She had played her heart out, and she had nothing left to hide. For a few long seconds, no one moved. It was like time had stopped. The grand hall that was once full of noise, music, and laughter now felt like a sacred place. Every single person in that room had felt something during her song, something real. And then, a sound broke the silence. It wasn't laughter or clapping. It was the quiet sound of someone standing up. A man in the back rose to his feet, slowly. Without saying anything, he began to clap. The sound of his hands filled the room. Then another person stood up, and another. Soon, the entire crowd was rising, one by one. They clapped not politely, but with emotion, with respect. With something they hadn't expected to feel at a billionaire's party. Ella looked up, her eyes wide. She hadn't expected applause. She thought maybe they'd laugh again, or just ignore her. But here, they were dozens of people, standing. For her, some had tears in their eyes. Others looked at her like she was someone completely different now. Not a waitress, not a poor girl, but an artist. A soul that had just reached out and touched theirs. Even a few of the women who had whispered cruel jokes earlier were now clapping with soft, amazed expressions. One of them mouthed the word, "Beautiful." "Mister?" Langford was still sitting in his chair. His face was hard to read now. His smirk was gone. And he wasn't clapping. He looked surprised, maybe even embarrassed. He had invited her to the piano as a joke, to make her feel small. But now he was the one who looked small. His moment of power had backfired. Ella stood up slowly from the piano bench. Her knees felt weak, but she stood tall. She looked out at the people. Not with pride, but with quiet strength. This moment wasn't about fame or showing off. It wasn't about getting praise. It was about healing something inside her. As she stepped down from the stage, people moved aside to let her walk through. A few guests reached out to touch her hand or whisper kind words. One older man said, "That song reminded me of my wife." A woman added, "You don't belong." In the kitchen, "You belong on a stage." Ella was too overwhelmed to say much. She nodded, smiled softly, and kept walking. She made her way toward the back of the hall, wanting to escape the attention. But just as she was near the edge of the room, she heard Mr. Langford's voice again. "Well, that was unexpected," he said loudly, trying to laugh. Trying to get the crowd's attention back. Seems the girl had some magic in those hands, after all. The room didn't laugh this time. No one joined in. He cleared his throat. "Maybe next time she can perform at my gala if she learns a second song," he added, forcing a smile. This time, a few people turned away from him. Others gave him a cold look. The mood had changed, and he knew it. Ella didn't stop. She didn't look back at him, but one of the other guests did. A woman in a red dress turned to Mr. Langford and said, "You tried to humiliate her, and instead she gave us the only moment of truth tonight." That hit him hard. He didn't reply. Outside, Ella finally stepped into the cool night air. She took a deep breath and let it all out slowly. She had been afraid, so afraid when she sat at that piano, but now she felt free. The stars above twinkled quietly, and for the first time in years, she felt like she belonged somewhere, maybe not in that world of money and power, but in the world of music, where heart mattered more than gold. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She checked it. One of the hotel staff had messaged her. "You were amazing. Everyone's talking about you." Ella smiled a real smile. She wasn't sure what would happen next. But something had changed. Something inside her had woken up. She looked at her hands. The same hands that served drinks and wiped tables every day now. The world had seen what those hands could do. And deep down, she knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Ella walked down the empty hallway behind the ballroom. Her heart was still beating fast, but it wasn't from fear anymore. It was something else, now something powerful. She felt like she had just broken through a wall she didn't even know was still there. Outside, the night was calm, but inside her chest, it felt like a storm had passed. And now there was silence, the kind of silence that only comes after you face something big and survived it. She stepped into the staff room, took off her apron, and sat on a small wooden bench in the corner. Her fingers were still tingling. From the piano keys, her mind was full of memories, of faces, of clapping hands. She couldn't believe what had just happened. She had been forced to play in front of people who thought she was nobody. She had stood on that stage feeling like a joke, like a servant, but now everything was different. A soft knock on the door made her look up. One of the kitchen staff, a young woman named Myra, peeked inside. "Ella, they're still talking about you out there," she said with wide eyes. "Some of them are even asking for your name." Ella blinked. "My name?" she repeated softly. Myra nodded excitedly. "Yes. A couple of guests said they want to talk to you. One of them is some kind of music producer, I think." Ella felt a strange mix of emotions, surprise, fear, hope. She didn't know what to say. She hadn't played for fame. She had just played because she needed to. "Should I tell them you'll come out?" Myra asked. Ella hesitated. Then she shook her head slowly. "Not yet," she whispered. "I just need a minute." Myra smiled kindly and closed the door behind her. Ella leaned back against the wall, closed her eyes, and thought about her mother again. Her mother had always believed in her, even when life got hard, even when the money ran out. "If you ever get the chance to share your music," her mother once said, "don't let fear stop you." Ella opened her eyes and smiled. "Sadly, you were right, Mom," she whispered. "I was scared, but I did it." Suddenly, her phone buzzed again. Another message, this time from the event manager. "Come see me when you can. Great job tonight." She sighed and stood up. Her legs still felt a little weak, but her heart was stronger now as she walked back toward the ballroom. She passed guests who nodded at her. Some even clapped softly again. She kept her head down, but she could feel the change in the air. She wasn't just the invisible waitress anymore. Back inside the grand hall, the music had started again. But it didn't feel the same. The new pianist was good, but something was missing. The crowd wasn't paying attention to him like they did to her. A tall man in a gray suit stepped in front of her. He looked serious but kind. "Excuse me? Are you the young woman who played earlier?" Ella nodded, unsure. "Yes," she said quietly. "I'm Samuel Reed," the man said, handing her a business card. "I work with a group that supports young musicians. We sponsor training, scholarships, and help people perform on real stages." Ella stared at the card, not believing what she was hearing. "We've never seen someone play like that. Not at an event like this," he continued. "You have real emotion in your music. I'd like to talk to you more. Maybe set up an audition if you're interested." Ella's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out at first. I don't know what to say," she finally whispered. "Say yes." He smiled, "Even if it's later. You don't have to decide now, but don't forget what you made everyone feel tonight." He gently placed the card in her hand and walked away. Ella stood still, staring at it. This wasn't a dream. It was real. She looked around the room. It was still full of rich people, fancy clothes, and too many voices. But now she didn't feel like she didn't belong. She walked toward the back of the room again, not to hide, but to think. Her whole world had changed in just one night. She found a quiet spot near the hallway and leaned against the wall. She looked down at the card again. Samuel Reed, Music Foundation. Could this be a door opening for her, after all these years? She didn't have answers yet. She didn't know what would happen tomorrow. But one thing was sure, she had faced the laughter, the pressure, the fear. She had been forced to the stage to be embarrassed. But instead, she had made the entire room silent with one song, and maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something beautiful. Ella sat alone in the staff hallway, holding the business card tightly in her hand. The name Samuel Reed stared back at her like a promise. Her hands were no longer shaking, but her heart was full of emotions, hope, fear, surprise, and something new. Belief. She had never expected any of this. She had just come to serve drinks, work quietly, and leave without being noticed. Now, everything was different. From the corner of her eye, she saw other waiters looking at her differently. Some smiled. One even gave her a thumbs up. "You were amazing," a young server whispered as she passed. Ella gave a small smile. But inside, she was still trying to understand what was happening. For years, she thought her music was gone. Her dreams buried under everyday struggles. But tonight, she had found it again. Her phone buzzed once more. Another message. This time from her supervisor. "Take the rest of the night off. You deserve it." She stared at the message for a few seconds. She couldn't believe what she was reading. She was used to long shifts, tired feet, and no thanks. But now she was being given a break. Because she was in trouble, but because she had done something good. Ella stepped outside the building. The night was cool and quiet. The sound of the city was far away, and above her, the stars were shining clearly. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes for a moment. Then she pulled out the card again. Her fingers traced over the letters slowly. She had no idea what kind of world waited behind this card, but for the first time in a long while, she wasn't afraid to find out. The next morning, Ella woke up in her small apartment with sunlight pouring through the window. Her back ached slightly from sleeping on the old mattress, but her heart felt light. She stared at the ceiling for a few seconds before getting up and walking to the small table by the window. The business card was still there, exactly where she had placed it the night before. She picked up her phone and opened her notes app. Slowly, she typed the song she had played at the party. It didn't have a name, just Memories. But she gave it a title, For Mom, After Breakfast. She decided to call the number on the card. Her hands trembled a little as she held the phone to her ear. It rang twice before a friendly voice answered. "This is Samuel Reed. Hello." "This is Ella," she said softly. "You gave me your card last night." At the event, there was a pause, then a warm tone. "Ah, the pianist," he said. "I've been hoping you'd call." They talked for 10 minutes. Samuel explained more about the foundation he worked for. They helped unknown musicians with talent to train, record, and perform. He invited her to visit their studio for a small audition, not formal, just a chance to hear her again. Ella agreed. They set a time for the next day. She hung up and just sat there, staring out the window. Her fingers itched to touch the piano again, but she didn't own one. The one she had as a child was long gone. Sold after her mother passed, so she went to the local community center, where there was an old piano in the corner of a large empty hall. She had cleaned it once during a part-time job and remembered it was rarely used. She walked in quietly, asked the receptionist for permission, and was surprised when they handed her the key to the hall. Alone in that room, she sat at the piano and placed her fingers on the keys. The sound was rough, slightly out of tune, but it was still a piano. She closed her eyes and started to play. The same melody from the night before came back, but this time she added more to it. She shaped it, stretched it, let it grow. She played until her fingers hurt and her back ached. She played until her heart felt full. That night, she slept better than she had in years. The next day, she went to the address Samuel had given her. It was a clean, simple studio. Not fancy like the mansion, but it felt warm and welcoming. Samuel greeted her with a handshake and introduced her to two others, a woman who taught classical piano and a man who managed the music program. They asked her to sit at the studio piano and play anything she liked. She took a deep breath and played her song again for Mom. This time, she didn't feel nervous. She just played with all her heart. When she finished, the room was silent again, but not because they didn't know what to say. They were just letting the moment settle. Finally, the teacher said softly, "That was beautiful." Samuel smiled. "I think we've just found someone very special." Ella didn't cry, but her eyes were shining for the first time. She believed in something she had given up long ago. Maybe this wasn't just a lucky night. Maybe it was her second chance, and this time she wasn't going to let it slip away. Ella walked out of the music studio with a soft smile on her face. The sun was shining gently, and the street felt brighter than usual. She held a small folder in her hand, a copy of her audition form and some handwritten notes from the music teacher. They had written kind words about her performance, and they wanted her to come back again as she walked. She felt something new in her heart. It was not just happiness, it was something deeper, hope. It was the kind of hope she hadn't felt since she lost her mother for the first time in years. She didn't feel stuck. She felt like her life was moving forward. She walked past the old cafe where she used to take her mother on weekends. Even though they didn't have much money, they used to sit near the window, share a single drink, and talk about dreams. Today, Ella stopped there again. She ordered a warm tea and sat by the window alone. She looked outside at the busy street and thought about everything that had happened. From a waitress at a rich man's party to standing in a music studio, it felt like a story from someone else's life. But it was hers. As she sipped her tea, her phone buzzed again. It was another message, this time from a guest who had been at the party. The message read, "I was there that night. Your music touched my heart. Please let me know if you perform again." Ella was shocked. She had never expected strangers to care. More messages followed in the next few days. Some people found her through the hotel staff. Others contacted her through Samuel's Music Foundation. One message said, "My daughter plays piano too. I showed her your video. You gave her courage." Ella couldn't believe it. Someone had recorded her performance, and now others were seeing it. It had quietly gone around social media. Just a short clip, but it was enough. She received a call from the hotel manager. "Ella, we're proud of you," he said. "You're welcome back anytime. But I have a feeling you won't be staying a waitress much longer." She laughed softly. "Maybe not," she replied. That week, Samuel invited her to return to the studio. This time, not just for another test, but to meet a small group of musicians who were training together. He wanted her to be part of them. Ella walked into the studio and saw young people like her, some shy, some excited, all full of dreams. They welcomed her kindly, and she felt like she belonged. They worked on new music together. They shared stories, and slowly, Ella began writing her own songs again. One afternoon, Samuel came to her while she was practicing and said, "Ella, we're holding a small concert next month. It's a chance for our students to perform. I want you to play your song." Her eyes went wide. "Me? On stage?" He nodded. "Yes, this time not because someone forced you but because you choose to." Ella felt nervous, but she agreed. She wanted to do it for her mother, for herself, and for everyone who believed in her. The next few weeks were full of hard work. Ella practiced every day. She polished her song, added new parts, and learned how to control her emotions while playing. She even began writing a second piece, something joyful, something that showed her new beginning. The day of the concert arrived. The hall was small, not like the Billionaire's party, but it was warm and full of people who loved music. Ella stood backstage in a simple dress. Her hands were cold, her heart pounding. But this time, the fear felt different. It wasn't fear of shame, it was excitement. When they called her name, she stepped onto the stage. Her eyes searched the crowd. And for a moment, she imagined her mother sitting there, smiling proudly. She sat down at the piano, closed her eyes, and let her fingers begin the first notes. A four-mom filled the room, soft, emotional, full of heart. Then she moved into her second song, a lighter melody that made people smile. When she finished, there was silence again, but only for a moment. Then came the applause. Not just polite clapping, but real, strong, honest applause. Some people stood. Some cheered, some wiped away tears. Ella stood, bowed slowly, and smiled. She had done it. Not just played, but shared her heart with the world. She had turned pain into beauty, fear into courage, silence into music. And now, a new door had opened. One she had never dreamed she'd reach, but she had reached it, not by luck. And not because someone rich gave her a stage, but because she found the strength to sit at the piano and begin again. The concert was over, and Ella sat in a quiet corner of the small backstage room. Her hands rested on her lap, still warm from playing. Her heart was calm now, not like before when it used to race with fear. This calm felt different. It was peace. It was pride. People were still clapping outside. Some were walking up to the stage, asking about her. Others were lining up to speak with the musicians, but Ella stayed back, letting the moment sink in. She had done it, not just played music, but shared her story, her heart, and her pain through her song. A young girl walked into the room with her mother. The girl was about 12, holding a small notebook. She came up to Ella shyly and said, "Can I have your autograph?" Ella was surprised. She had never signed anything before, but she smiled and took the pen. "What's your name?" "Sophia," the girl said with a big smile. Ella wrote, "To Sophia, keep playing, keep dreaming. Music is your voice." The mother spoke gently. "She saw your video from the party, and she wanted to start learning piano because of you." Ella felt her eyes sting with tears again. "Thank you," she whispered. "That means more than you know." After they left, Samuel walked in with the other teachers. They were all smiling. One of them clapping slowly. "You were brilliant." "Tonight, Ella," Samuel said, "you didn't just play music, you told a story." She looked at him and asked, "Do you think I could really do this?" He nodded. "You already are." He handed her an envelope. "Inside is a letter," he said. "It's an invitation to join our advanced music program. It's fully funded. You'll train with top musicians, perform at more events, and maybe even record your own album one day." Ella opened the envelope with shaking hands. It was real, not a dream, not a promise, but an official letter with her name on it. Her breath caught in her throat. For so long, she had worked long hours in silence, serving people who never knew her name. And now, her name was on something that mattered. A few weeks later, Ella packed a small bag and moved into the music foundations. Training center. It wasn't fancy, but it had everything she needed. Practice rooms. Teachers, friends who loved music like she did. Every morning she woke up early, touched the piano keys, and reminded herself, this is real, this is mine. Months passed, and her skill grew. She learned new songs, new styles, and even began teaching younger students who looked up to her. She was no longer the quiet waitress people ignored. She was a musician, a teacher, a storyteller. One evening, while practicing in an empty hall, she was surprised to see someone standing near the back. It was Mr. Langford, the billionaire from the party. Ella froze for a moment, but then stood slowly and said, "I didn't expect to see you here." He walked forward, slower than usual, not as proud or loud as before. "I saw your name on the concert list," he said quietly. "I came to listen." Ella didn't speak, waiting. He sighed and looked around the hall. That night, "I was wrong. I was trying to make people laugh at you." "I didn't think you'd play like that." She nodded. "I know. I never said sorry." He added, "But I am now." There was silence. Ella looked at him, and her voice was calm. "I don't need an apology. I already got what I needed from myself." He nodded slowly. "You're something special." "Ella, don't let anyone make you feel small again." She smiled slightly. "I won't." After he left, she sat at the piano and played again, not the sad melody from before, but a new one. It was full of light, full of strength, full of dreams that were no longer lost, and that's how Ella's journey truly began. Not with fame or riches, but with one moment when she was forced to play in front of strangers and ended up showing them something real. Her story wasn't about luck, it was about courage. It was about standing in the middle of fear and still pressing the first note. Now, every time she played, people listened. Not because she was famous, but because she was true. And in every note, her mother lived on. Her music had once been silent, locked away by sadness. But now, 'twas alive again. And the girl who once hid in the shadows had become the voice that could silence an entire room with just one song.